Tonight, President Trump going after yet another African-American lawmaker, but now he's also trashing an entire major American city. Then, yet another cabinet shakeup and yet another Trump sycophant who's been appointed to take over a pivotal position. We'll discuss the dangers of that. Also, the Russian meddling in our election is actually worse than you thought it was. And believe it or not, the Republican Senate isn't doing a thing about it. Evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Now, we're going to begin this week talking about something that, I'll be honest with you, I'm frankly sick of talking about, and I'm sure a lot of you folks at home are sick of hearing about. I'm talking about our president saying and tweeting things below the decency of the presidency, let alone basic decency. President Trump, he's blowing loudly another racial dog whistle as he attacks well-respected African-American member of Congress, and he also denigrates a major American city in the process. The president continuing to appeal to the worst elements of society and to intentionally inflame tensions, all in the name of base politics and, frankly, racism. The latest firestorm had flared up after House Oversight Chairman Elijah Cummings criticized the acting head of Homeland Security over those deplorable conditions in migrant detention facilities. Here, Elijah Cummings, a Democrat from Maryland.
What does that mean? What does that mean when a child is sitting in their own feces, can't take a shower? Come on, man. What's that about? None of us would have our children in that position. They are human beings.
So that observation about basic care for children apparently was a bridge too far for our president. Trump, he said Cumming's district is rat-infested and riddled with crime, and he asks out loud why anyone would ever want to live there. He also said it is the worst district in the entire United States of America, saying Cummings is so busy with his, quote, radical oversight, he's neglecting his own district. After a flood of criticism called President Trump out, calling him a racist again, he actually has said it is Cummings that is racist for having the temerity to even bring it up. Unbelievably, Trump now is accusing Cummings of playing the race card. So just think about that. The President of the United States blasting a major American city, not offering a scintilla of a solution to the problem, and calling an African-American man racist after Trump attacked him. Now, for many people, this is not just political, this is personal. I want you to take a listen to CNN anchor Victor Blackwell this weekend, talking about the city that he grew up in.
The president says about Congressman Cummings' district, that no human would want to live there. You know who did, Mr. President? I did. People get up and go to work there. They care for their families there. They love their children who pledge allegiance to the flag, just like people who live in districts of congressmen who support you, sir. They are Americans too.
And the Baltimore Sun also had something to say about the president, writing a scathing editorial. I want to read a portion of it. Quote, "We would tell the most dishonest man to ever occupy the Oval Office, the mocker of war heroes, the gleeful grabber of women's private parts, the serial bankrupter of businesses, the useful idiot of Vladimir Putin, and the guy who insisted there are good people among murderous neo-Nazis, that he's still not fooling most Americans into believing he's even slightly competent in his current post, or that he possesses a scintilla of integrity. Better to have some vermin living in your neighborhood than to be one." Now, all of this, it fits a disturbing and, frankly, disgustingly regular pattern from this president. Now, just a couple weeks ago, as you know well, the president, he told the 4 congresswomen on your screen to go back to where they came from. If, first off, is a tried and true racist trope, but it's also idiotic. All 4 of those women, they're American citizens, 3 of them born here in the States. Predictably, this fired up his base. At a rally in North Carolina, the crowd chanted, "Send her back," when Trump mentioned the Congresswoman, Ilhan Omar. Listen for yourself. After that caused yet another flare-up of controversy, and believe it or not, a few, I can count them on one hand, but Republicans who took issue with what the president said. Trump said, well, he didn't support or agree with the chant we just heard. He actually tried to speak quickly, he claimed, to stop the chant. Once again, well over 10,000, this adds to the lies, and we have the tape to prove it. He stood around silently for 13 seconds while the crowd chanted on. Here it is.
Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
Trump, for his part, has been marginalizing and criticizing people of color for decades. For those of you in New York, you remember well the Central Park Five. Teenagers convicted of raping and brutally beating the Central Park jogger back in 1989. 4 of the alleged were black, 1 Hispanic. Now back then, Trump, he took out a full-page ad and actually paid for it in several local dailies, calling for, without equivocation, the death penalty. Even after those 5 guys were released from prison because DNA exonerated them, that they never had any part in the crime, Trump couldn't admit his error and instead stuck to his guns, never once acknowledging what could have been. Now, it shouldn't surprise anyone. He never apologizes for anything. The Baltimore Sun editorial wrote about this, but it's worth mentioning yet again. Even after hundreds of white supremacists and neo-Nazis rallied in Charlottesville, chanting filth like the Jews will not replace us, the president, the same president who took issue with Ms. Omar, would not condemn those marchers. Instead, he put them on equal footing with the people who gathered to protest the racism and the hate-mongering.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
And it wasn't just about a lawmaker or a group or even, for that matter, an entire city. This president has called out an entire continent, saying Africa and Haiti, for that matter, were S-hole countries, and why would we want people from there? And speaking of Africa, don't forget about Donald Trump leading the birtherism rallying cry. Trump kept beating the drum, saying Barack Obama was born in Kenya. Of course, not true. He even demanded to see Obama's birth certificate, which in the end, Obama produced. Never apologized for that one either. And Judge Curiel, he shouldn't hold his breath waiting for an apology. He, again, the judge in the Trump University case. He was born in Indiana, but his parents Mexican. And that's why Trump didn't think the judge could be fair. Take a listen.
I have had horrible rulings. I've been treated very unfairly by this judge. Now, this judge is of Mexican heritage. I'm building a wall.
So no Mexican judge could ever be involved in a case that involves you?
He's a member of a society where, very pro-Mexico, and that's fine. It's all fine. But
Except that you're calling into question his heritage.
I think he should recuse himself.
Should be noted, Trump University was a giant hustle, but I digress. And it's not just about race with this president. Anyone who's frankly different than him gets treated differently. LGBT community, they're a perfect example. He's gone out of his way to have his administration roll back protections for those folks, even fighting court battles about whether or not they deserve protection against discrimination in the workplace. In the trans community, they got it even worse. He's trying to boot them from the military, jeopardize their health care benefits, basically punish them for not being part of his base or basic instincts, or more specifically, because they didn't probably come from states that voted for him in his mind. Now that brings me to this cringeworthy moment that hasn't gotten as much attention. It also happened at the Oval Office and also happened recently. It shows, once again, a simple absence of human dignity. And I want to set the stage. And I also want to give a hat tip to Roger Cohen in the Times for highlighting the incident in a recent piece. A Yazidi woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize for her campaign to end mass rape. She gets an invitation to meet the president. I should note, ISIS sold her into sexual slavery in Iraq when it overran her village. Her mother and 6 brothers were murdered. Here's part of her meeting with Donald Trump.
They killed my mom My 6 brothers, they left behind them.
Where are they now?
They killed them. They are in the mass graves in Sinjar.
And you had the Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
But
They gave it to you for what reason? Maybe you can explain.
for what reason? For that, after all this happened to me, I didn't give up. I make it clear to everyone that ISIS raped thousands of Yazidi women. This one was first time the woman from Iraq, she get out and spoke about what happened to
Oh,
them.
really?
And
Is that right?
It's
That's the
first time, and it's.
So you escaped.
I escaped, but I don't have my freedom yet.
To say that our president, who every other president's briefed before they go to a public event, to say that he couldn't bother to hear about the person he was about to meet, to say that he couldn't bother to even listen to what this woman went through and why she was being so honored, to say that he couldn't even care about the horrors that she went through and so many others have, that would be giving him too much credit to call it disinterest. Disrespectful is even too tame a term. Unbelievably, even 9/11 is not sacred to this president. At the signing ceremony for the bill that extends benefits for first responders and their families, a president who did not lift a finger in his entire time as president to this point to help out this population, and only after shame forced the Republicans to finally allocate the funds, only then did he decide to put his signature on it. And how did he use this ceremony after so many people died so unnecessarily? He made a joke about the stage collapsing. Bear in mind, thousands of people, as you know, died when the towers collapsed, and hundreds of first responders died on that day, and so many more have died in the aftermath.
Now I'm going to sign this bill into law, and I don't know if the stage will hold it, but if it doesn't, we're not falling very far.
Okay. I want to wrap this thing up by looking at how our president chooses to spend his time. This weekend, when we saw 2 mass shootings, one in California and one in Brooklyn, those hardly deserved even a mention from the President of the United States. What he did, though, to have time for was to send dozens of tweets slamming a major American city and a prominent African-American congressman who was a vital player in the civil rights movement. He only had time for a short statement and a single tweet about a murder at a festival in Gilroy where 3 people were killed, including 2 children. Over the course of the past few years, I have learned, like I expect most of you, not to expect much from Donald Trump. And I take no joy in saying that. I've come to expect the tantrums, the lack of basic humanity, the self-promoting, the lies, the self-enriching. And that's just a very abridged version. But one thing I continue to have trouble swallowing is a party with no conscience, a party that should know better, but is complicit in all of this with their silence. Even after blatant racism from the commander-in-chief, it's mostly crickets from the party of Lincoln and Reagan. And that could be the legacy, if they're not careful, of the modern grand old party. When this chapter in American history comes to the books, what will they say about them? There was crickets and there was complicity. When we come back, Andrew Whitman will take over and he'll discuss the political fallout from all of this and more.